Welcome to Real, Brave, and Unstoppable. Here, you'll hear stories and inspiration about showing up in the world authentically and having the courage to create the life you want. I'm your host, Courtney Rivard. I'm a mom, recovering engineer, lover of the outdoors, and professional life coach. I help smart women just like you live happier lives full of purpose and joy by empowering them to love who they are, get unstuck, and take action toward creating the life they dream of. In other words, I help them be real, brave, and unstoppable. It is possible, and you can do it too. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Real, Brave, and Unstoppable. I think I say this every time recently, but thanks for your patience in waiting for episodes these days. I'm really busy and trying to balance everything. And the podcast is something that I just, going once a month, which seems to be the schedule I'm on, feels like doable right now. So rest assured, at some point, we'll be able to kick up that cadence a little bit and get some more episodes out to you. I love seeing when I have a new episode. I have so many downloads, and it's great to see that this podcast is getting out there and people are listening to it, and it's helpful for a lot of people. So I'm really proud of that, and just know that eventually I'll have a lot more episodes for you, but just right now I'm trying to balance a lot of things. So today I'm going to talk about our thoughts. And I've talked about this before a little bit, but recently I've been coaching a couple people who this topic has been so game-changing for them. So today I want to talk about how our thoughts get in the way and like what we can do about that. But first, oh my gosh, it's June. How are we here? Summertime. And I know that so many of you, your kids either have wrapped up school or are wrapping up school, and it brings a whole new set of challenges with summertime. And I just want to throw out a little reminder there too, even though the schedules can be a little crazy and, trying to figure out what to occupy your kids with over the summer, try to have fun this summer. I have such great memories of summer times, riding bikes with friends and popsicles and watermelons, but, lots of things like that, being on the river, going swimming, so many good memories. So just remember, even though it's busy in the summertime, your kids will someday really, appreciate the summer memories. So a few weeks ago, I went on a backpacking trip, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've been gradually accumulating my own gear, but I went on an overnight thing with REI a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, and it was so fun. I just have to say, I signed up by myself. I went by myself. I didn't know anyone, which sometimes, can be a little, unnerving. But I just also had to say, this podcast name is Real, Brave, and Unstoppable. So, this is the kind of stuff that we do to be real, brave, and unstoppable. We go sign up for backpacking trips by ourselves if that's what we want to do. We don't wait for other people to pull us along. We decide, this is what I want to do. This is me. I'm going to find the courage to go do this. And then we go do it. So I just wanted to share that because it's kind of an empowering feeling when you do take that little step out of your comfort zone and then you go do the thing that was a little bit ooh, should I be doing this? So remember, friends, before we dive into the rest of the podcast, remember that confidence doesn't come first. Confidence doesn't come first. You have to have the courage. You have to be brave first. And with continued courage, continued bravery will come confidence, but it never works the other way around. So just wanted to share that. Okay, so let's dive right into the topic about thoughts. So the first thing is just talking about understanding what a thought is. Thought is really just how we make sense of things. They're really just words, right? And our thoughts come from we have all these stories and narratives and, beliefs about the world. And those things have come from when we're little, and we've taken those and carried them with us through our entire lives, picked up new ones along the way. And, pretty soon, they become this truth for us. They're the lens through which we see our lives. It's our perspective. And the problem with it is, why are we even talking about this? The problem is that we tend to create this self that can manage the uncertainty of the world. It makes sense of the world. We're able to create certainty through our thoughts and control through our thoughts. And the problem is that we then become really too close to the thoughts, and we think that they're facts. And so when we have a thought that's unhelpful, we don't really always stop to question it. And, things like, I'm not good enough, or so-and-so doesn't like me, or I should be this kind of a mom, or, because I failed at that means I am less of a person, or, thoughts like that, or even little tiny sneaky thoughts like I'm fat, and I don't know that that's a tiny thought, but, sneaky thoughts like that, where we're looking in the mirror and those thoughts are saying that we're not pretty enough, or we're not thin enough. When we compare ourselves to other people, those thoughts are not helpful. And so that's why we're talking about this today. We recreate the world in our mind so we can try to control it and create certainty. And then what happens is we live in our mind because we can control our mind, but we can't control the world. So it creates this feeling of empowerment and control. It creates certainty in our mind. But then we're identifying with our brain, we're living inside of our mind because we've created that certainty. And the problem with this is that when things don't line up on the outside, then we think something's wrong. So there's a book called The Untethered Soul that I love. It was my first foray into this concept of thoughts are not facts, or I am not my thoughts. I'm just the observer of my thoughts. So I'm going to refer to The Untethered Soul a lot today. And that book is by Michael A. Singer. So if you want to check it out, highly recommend. But the foundation of that book is really talking about how, I just mentioned we recreate the outside world inside of ourselves, and then we live in that mind. We see the world through this lens, and that lens helps us make sense of it. It creates certainty in our brains, and our brains don't like uncertainty. Have you ever gotten into a place where something isn't certain and you kind of freak out about it? Yeah, me too. So that's our brains do not like to have things uncertain. We always we go through life thinking we're supposed to figure out how life should be and then make it that way. So how did we come up with the notion that life isn't okay just the way it is, or that it won't be okay just the way it will be? And this leads me to talk about, I've mentioned this quote before, but Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun, one of my favorite quotes is that, and I'm going to butcher this is just paraphrasing, but she talks about how the reason we suffer is because we cling so tightly to the way that we want things to be or the way that we think things should be. And the problem is we have no control over that, really. We don't have full control over that. Maybe some parts of it we do, but we suffer because when we can't make that happen, we think that something's wrong. And then when we think something's wrong, that creates a whole set of new problems. And one of the things, as I was researching for this episode, one of the things I came across was a quote or a writing is an idea that it's actually possible to never have another problem for the rest of your life, because events are not problems. They're just events. It's the resistance you have to the problems, the events, that is what causes the problem. So if you didn't have any resistance to the event, it would never be a problem, right? So what I mean by that is let's say somebody says something to you that isn't very nice. So maybe it's not very nice, but the fact is the perspective of it is neutral before we give it any meaning. Whatever that person says is neutral before we give it any meaning. And it doesn't mean that it can't hurt if someone says something that's mean, but it's the resistance to it. What does that person think of me? Should I be different? That's the resistance. So then it becomes a problem. That person said something mean to me. What does that mean about me? And so that's resistance. So if we can let go of that resistance and just be that person said something mean to me, that kind of hurts, and I feel XYZ, but I'm not going to make it a problem because I can't control what they say about me. Now, that's easier said than done. It takes a lot of practice, but that idea can be really helpful to think about. So we're talking about thoughts today because we think they're helping us navigate life. And at the same time, the thoughts in our brain do help us navigate life. But while our brain is such an amazing, amazing thing, sometimes it just isn't very helpful. And it's almost like, oh my God, there's like a glitch in the program here. What is going on? It's gotten faulty data somewhere along the line. And really, that's kind of what it is. The limiting beliefs that we have, it's faulty data. We're saying the sky is green, but we're looking through green glasses. It's kind of what that's like. So what do we do about this? This is the part I love, because game changer number one is just simply self-awareness. One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know if I made it up or someone else made it up. A client of mine recently said I should put this on a t-shirt. So I'm thinking about that with the podcast name. Awareness is half the battle. And it really is, friends. It really is, because until you know what's going on in your mind and in your emotions and in your body, it's really tough to do anything with it. It's really tough to see when you're hooking into things that aren't helpful, and to, take steps to unhook from that, for example. When I introduce this concept to people, a lot of times will have them start with a practice of what we call mindful awareness. And this is really so they can start to notice what they're thinking and feeling and how those thoughts and emotions actually create our reality. And here's where things get a little mind-blowing. Your thoughts don't define you, okay? They're just outputs of what your consciousness perceives. So you perceive something and your brain registers something, right? And then it spits out all these thoughts about it. It's the computer program that's running. But somebody else might have a completely different lens that they're looking through. So they perceive that event or circumstance completely different. We have this inner monologue that never shuts off. Our brain spits out over 60,000 thoughts a day. So it's just always going. And here's an example. This is so funny. When I have clients do a stream of consciousness writing, a stream of consciousness writing is where you set a timer, you take out a pen and paper or even a computer, and you just write or type, and you don't stop. You do not take your pen off the paper. You don't stop typing. A lot of people will be like, yeah, but what if I don't have a thought? And then I say to them, well, that's a thought too. So it's mind blowing. Everything is a thought. Start to notice that. It's kind of funny. One of the reasons people get so hung up on meditating is because they think they're not supposed to have thoughts. But the idea is that we always have thoughts. We're always going to have thoughts. It's the ability to notice the thoughts and let them just be there without hooking into them. So the untethered soul talks about two selves, so to speak, the personal self and the actual self. The self, capital S, self, is pure stream of consciousness that's always flowing. So always aware of the thoughts you're thinking, aware of what you're observing, it's the observer. And then there's the personal self, which is the identity that you form. And it's based on how your inner voice perceives the stream of consciousness and the thought patterns that come out of it, right? So that consciousness is just taking in everything. And then the personal self is making sense of that and kind of interpreting it through whatever lens of beliefs and, stories you have. So we all have a self-concept that is made up of the thoughts that we have about ourselves in the world. This is who we think we are. And it's never really who we are. It's just our brain has created this. You can maybe also call it the ego. But we create this self-concept to fit into the world, to create certainty, to define ourselves. And that's how we decide, by having that certainty of who we are, that's how we see ourselves in the world. It's how we fit in. It's how we figure out how to navigate it. And because this structure is how we see ourselves in the world, our brain is going to do anything to keep that intact. So we defend it. We defend those thoughts because who are we without those thoughts? This is my identity. This is how I create certainty in the world. This is how I make things all work. And sometimes it's not super helpful, but when we defend it, we look for evidence to support it. And it's just human nature. We're always going to look for evidence of the thing we believe. Our brain does not naturally look for evidence that refutes that thing that we believe. And sometimes the evidence is based on past experiences etc., that color our thinking, and it creates what we call thought errors. Just think about it like a computer program error. Let's use the example. I've had several clients recently who we've talked about being peacekeepers. Like when they were little, they really had to like not show a lot of emotion, like kind of be reading the adults all the time, making sure that they kept things, like maybe they had younger siblings, had to keep things really even keeled so that things stayed calm. So that worked for them then because they needed to have some sense of stability and calm in their household. So they learned that as long as I keep the peace, then things are good. But then when they get older, all of a sudden now they're trying to keep the peace with like everybody. That's their identity. That's how they keep themselves safe. That's how they keep others safe. And so that becomes a thought error. The thought can be many different things. I have one client who her self-worth is really hung up in keeping the peace, keeping everyone happy. That's a thought error because that's not how you keep people happy, right? And nothing against my client at all. It's a faulty thought that it worked at one point and now it doesn't. But our brain can't really, see the difference unless you're really intentional about it. But we present this package of beliefs as who we are, right? It's not who we are, though. I can't impress that upon you enough. And here's where things get a little like meta. You're not your thoughts. I said this before, but you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that is observing the thoughts. So you're not that self-concept that you've created in your mind. You're just the observer of it. Okay. So it's almost like you're going up about 20,000 feet and you're watching yourself. Like it's like an out of body experience, kind of, if you think about it kind of like that. Or if you think about it as, when people say, I can't see the forest through the trees. When you're in your personal self, like in your mind, you're like in the forest and you can't see the bigger picture. But like the awareness that you are is like rising above it and being able to see the whole forest. So when you can think of your mind as those two entities I talked about, the self and the personal self, you can envision that those separate things, and you can envision yourself stepping above and observing all of this thinking that's going on. And this is where the game changer happens. The only real solution is to take the seat of witness consciousness and completely change your frame of reference. So in one of the coaching programs I took, my mentor talked about something called an old tired path. And basically, so the old tired path is being in the forest, going through like, let's just say you're somebody who feels like you have to prove yourself. And that creates one whole set of issues. But on the other side, if you don't prove yourself, you think you've given up, like that doesn't feel good either. So you're on this path of like same results either way, really. So the game changer is where you can notice that and you can change your frame of reference. So now you're just a totally different way of being. Like what would happen if that was possible to get off of that path? And to think about it like there are two distinct aspects to your like inner being. There's you, the awareness or the witnesser of things, and that which you watch, right? So there's the stuff you watch, which is the thinking mind, the thinker, and then there is you, the awareness. You're not the thinking mind, you are aware of the thinking mind. You're the consciousness that's behind the mind, and you're aware of your thoughts. You're aware of your thoughts. This is why self-awareness is so helpful, because you start to see where these thoughts go awry, where they're not helpful. So thinking is something you watch the mind do. The self simply notices that the mind and the emotions are unraveling and kind of accepts that. You might not like it, but is able to sort of just let it be there and observe it, because that stuff changes. Nobody has ever become truly okay by changing the things on the outside. There's always the next problem, right? The only real solution is to take the seat of the observer and completely change your frame of reference. As long as you are in there trying to manipulate the outside to match the inside, you will never be free or happy, truly. You need to work on the inside, and then you find the things on the outside that work for you, that are you. So you got to break that habit of thinking the solution to your problems is to fix the things on the outside. And going back to that idea of problems, the perception of problems, like what if these things weren't problems? They just were circumstances. They're just events. So this all starts with entertaining this concept of observing, practicing awareness. And remember, awareness is half the battle. So keep your eyes out. I may come up with a t-shirt. I think it's a great idea. So shout out to my client, Alyssa, who came up with that idea. I hope you don't mind me mentioning your name. The second game changer is that you do not have to believe your thoughts, which can also be called like a narrative, story, limiting beliefs. And this is where things get so fun. First of all, what are limiting beliefs? I already kind of covered it, but I didn't really talk about it as limiting beliefs. But belief systems are just like a structure of, thoughts. It's like your lens. This is how I see the world. So, I mentioned peacekeeping. Like that could be a belief system that I need to keep the peace. This is my job. This is how I find my worth, is to make people happy, to keep the peace. And if I don't keep the peace, things are going to fall apart and things will be terrible. Or perfectionism, another example of limiting belief set, right? Like I need to be perfect to be good enough. I fear criticism. I don't want people to think I'm not good at this. And that is one that I have a lot of experience with this one, and it's a tough one to get over. But those are a couple of examples. So how to get some perspective? Like remember we talked about just changing your perspective, getting off of that path and seeing things from just a different frame of reference. Here's what I like to do. 3 N's: notice, name, neutralize. The first thing for when you're when you start to practice awareness of your thoughts, the first thing, and this also works for emotions too, by the way, but the first thing that you can do is just notice it and then naming it. And the way to do this, there's a subtle shift, nuance in how to think about it or how to say it to yourself. Instead of saying the thought like it's a fact, like, I suck at this. You want to say, oh, I notice I'm having the thought that I suck at this. So you're the noticer watching this thought come out, right? So you're just distancing from yourself a little bit. There are some other ways that we can distance from our thoughts too, which we'll cover in a minute. And then the second tool to sort of help us neutralize those thoughts a little more is to challenge them. Look at evidence for and against, and we'll talk more about that in a minute too. But this creates a more flexible perspective. You want to be able to look at this stuff from many different angles instead of just the one lens, the green glasses that creates the green sky. Like you want to be able to try on all the different color glasses. And remember, your mind wants to create certainty. So it's going to look for evidence to support the beliefs you have. So you have to be kind of strong in this and really be intentional. You're the one who's trying to use the analytical mind to protect yourself. So what you'll see is that your mind is always telling you that you have to change something outside in order to solve your inner problems. But if you're smart and you're aware, you will not play this game. You'll be like, no, thank you, brain. Thank you, but no, thank you. That's a distancing tactic, by the way. And I'll, again, talk more about that in a minute. So when we want to do that, though, when we want our brain to manipulate the world in order to fix problems, like our own problems, it's an impossible task. Impossible. And then you're not living your life, you're living in your mind. This is where hamster wheel syndrome happens, when you're living in your mind and you're actually not living your life. Okay. So like I mentioned, the first thing is to notice. This awareness is such a game changer, just to be able to step back and notice, self-awareness. And then ask yourself, is that thought working for me? So I have another client who was really frustrated with someone she was working with. And her thought was that he shouldn't be doing his job that way. He should be doing it this way. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that thought in and of itself. But the question really becomes, is it working for you? And it was creating a lot of stress for her because she was so frustrated. She wanted him to be able to see that he should do his work a different way. And the problem? Well, I think you can guess, she can't control how he shows up. So that's you got to ask, is it working for you? And if it's no, then we have to figure out how to look at that from a different frame of reference. And remember that, I notice I'm having the thought that this guy should be doing his work differently and my way is better. Also remember, like I mentioned this earlier, thoughts are just words. They're just words. They're sentences. and so you get to decide which ones to keep. So if you want to keep a thought, fine, but you got to ask yourself, like, is it helping me? So then we move into what are some other ways that you can distance from thoughts, to just step back and see the whole forest. Like, oh, that's just a thought. And some ways that you can do that are, I already mentioned, like, I notice I'm having the thought that, but other things you can do are just imagining your thoughts as leaves on a stream. Like, you just notice a thought, it's on a leaf on a stream and it just floats away. So let it go. If you notice that you're having a hard time letting one go, you just keep putting it on the leaf and it goes down the stream. And in fact, there's a great audio online. If you search for Russ Harris, Leaves on a Stream, there's an audio that like takes you through that. It's amazing. I've had so many clients really love that one. Another way is to picture your thoughts as clouds that are just passing by. Like you're the sky, the thoughts are just coming and going. You can picture thoughts on as suitcases on a conveyor belt, or you can picture them as words on a computer screen. Play around with the font in your mind, the colors. It takes some of the power out of the thoughts to just think of them as a sequence of letters and words to form sentences. The next tool that we have is challenging our thoughts. And this is like when thoughts are really sticky, and if it's a belief that's very strong and it's tough to just distance from it, like it just kind of keeps coming back. There's a woman named Byron Katie. She has a book called 4 Questions That Will Change Your Life, and she calls her method the work. And the 4 questions are, is that thought true? The second question is, no, is it really true? Like, can you prove it? 3 is there a reason that's stress-free to keep the thought? And then 4 is, who would you get to be if you didn't have that thought anymore, if it wasn't a problem for you? It can also be helpful to, like, when you're asking yourself if it's true, that first question can be sneaky for some people, because sometimes people will be, well, yeah, I think it is true. But then you go to, no, is it really, like, can we prove this in a court of law? So that's where you can go to evidence. What evidence do I have that this is true? And what evidence do I have that it's not true? And more often than not, you will find more evidence if you look for it. That's for it being not true. Your brain will come up with the evidence for why it's true a lot faster, but you have to kind of stick with that one. So those are some things that like we do when we notice thoughts, when we're in awareness and we're noticing thoughts that are not helping us. And like, that's when we go, okay, that one's not helping. I don't want to keep it. I need to figure out how to find a new frame of reference, a new perspective on this. So distancing, challenging. So, the tough part in all of this is that, sure, I can talk about this all day, but you actually have to do it, and that can be hard. Quick little refresher on thoughts, feelings, or emotions, and actions, or outcomes, results. We have a thought about a circumstance, right? And it's all like we've talked about today. Our thought is based on our experiences, and that's our lens, right? So whatever thought we have, it creates a feeling. If you think about somebody walking into the room that you can't stand and your thought is, oh my God, I hate that person, you might feel like disgusted or angry or I don't know, whatever. But if you have the thought, oh, I'm so happy to see her, your feeling is going to be very different, maybe happy, excited. So the thought we have creates the feeling. And then the feeling, if we're hooked into the feeling, and it will dictate how we show up, it determines our actions. It's running the show. So that's how they're connected. And obviously the action or the behavior affect the result that we get. So you're going to have to take action towards what you really want, even if you're uncertain or if you have negative thoughts or limiting thoughts or fears. And that's hard sometimes. Go back to that courage I talked about at the beginning of today. Because that feeling, you're going to feel, let's just say you feel depressed or frustrated, or, and your action is typically to either like lash out or even just to kind of shut down. Those actions are not really, if they're not getting you the outcome you want, like that's where we got to work, right? That's the hard part though. When you feel, let's just say you feel depressed and you don't have a lot of energy to get up and do something. And I want to just stop and clarify something. People that struggle with depression, I am not in any way saying that you should just be able to get up off the couch and do the opposite thing. I'm not saying that at all. I'm talking more about, I should probably change the word to, let's just say you're feeling sad. So if you're feeling sad and you're having a hard time like getting moving, for example, it might feel really uncomfortable to get moving and carry on with your life, like carrying that sadness, because a lot of times what we do is wait for a better feeling to be able to take action, but that's not really how it works, because that's like you're staying in your comfort zone. So in order to really make changes, you need to be able to recognize when you're feeling not so great, and you have to be able to do the thing anyway. Like, what's important to you here, and how do you want to show up? And even though you don't feel good, how can I take a step towards what it is that I really want in life, or who I want to be in life? So a few things to keep in mind with that. One is just, like I said before, remember, doing comes before confidence. It's not going to feel good when you start to shift some of these thoughts, because they've been protective, right? And they've worked for you at some point in your life. Like, acknowledge that. They worked. They don't work anymore. But if you wait for it to feel good, you're never going to take the step. And then you're not even in control of it. You have control over when you take the step. So just do it, even if it feels bad. The second thing is really look at your relationship with failure. Like, what's the problem? What if failure wasn't a problem? You can insert your own version of this here. Like, what if people pleasing wasn't a problem? Like, what would life be like then? But going back to failure, because I think that can be such a big one, but failure can be a really good teacher. Somebody said to me, yeah, but I never feel that in the moment. And I laughed and I was like, yeah, you're not going to. Like, in the moment when you fail, you're not going to be like, oh, good, I failed. I get to learn something. No, you're going to feel like shit. But it's in the work after. Like, you failed, you feel like shit, but you're still going to take a step towards what it is that what's important to you. That's the magic. That's the secret sauce. The next thing is too, like, stepping through some of these thoughts that might hold you back. It's like, sometimes with perfectionistic type ones, remember the word yet. Like, so sometimes people will be like, I don't know how, like that thought, that's not a super helpful thought. I'm not good at that. I don't know how, I'm not good at that. And sometimes just putting that word yet afterwards, it makes a big difference. And then work on believing that I'm not good at that yet. I can work on that. A couple of examples just to wrap this up. I'm going to share one related to like body image, because I think I see this come up so much, and it's come up in myself as well. When people really want to be a certain body shape or size, weight, whatever it is. So the thought is, things would be better if I'm just going to make this up, but things would be better if I wore a size that was 2 sizes smaller, or things would be better if I only would lose 20 pounds. So that's the thought. That's not super helpful, because we are then trying to create on the outside, the body, which is outside. We're trying to create that to make us happy on the inside. And so if that comes up, it's like, oh, I noticed that there's that thought. I noticed that I'm thinking I'll solve my problems if I'm 20 pounds lighter. I noticed that. And then I didn't mention this before, but one of my favorite things too is to thank your brain for that information. Thanks, but no thanks. Not helpful. Just like kind of remind it that, hey, you know what? I get that that's what you think, but not a super helpful thought. But thank you. That can kind of help place some distance between it as well. But in terms of taking action, like trying to believe the thought that that's not what's going to solve the problem, it's scary for people, because what comes up is, well, if I don't have that thought, I'm not going to push myself. And if I just accept where I'm at, then I'm going to gain all this weight and just let everything go, and things will be really bad. That's kind of what keeps people stuck. But instead, if you say, you know what, that thought's really not helpful. Like, who do I want to be in this situation? I want to feel empowered to take care of my health. So what is a decision that I could make to do that? And that might feel uncomfortable to let go of that thought because of what I said. Like, you're afraid, well, if I just accept this and try to be who I want to be, what's that going to do to my body? Right? So that's an example of where courage before confidence with that. You just have to keep doing it, even if it feels uncomfortable. Another client of mine has a thing with asking for help, because asking for help to her feels like failure. And so There are a whole bunch of different thoughts that are part of that belief system. But the uncomfortable part for her is obviously like asking for help, because she feels like it says something about her as a person. And for her to ask for help, like, she's never going to overcome that series of thoughts if she doesn't start asking for help. And so she's like, at one point she was like, well, I don't really know how to ask for help. It's just really hard. And so that's where that yet word comes in. Yeah, you don't know how to ask for help yet, but we just got to work on doing it. Like, it's courage before confidence. And one final example, another client of mine was like her to-do list at work. It was like, that's how she defined her success at work, is if she got everything done on her to-do list. Well, you can imagine how that went, how successful she actually felt at work, because there's always more that gets added to it, right? And again, then you're trying to use something on the outside, the to-do list, to make you feel better on the inside. So letting go of that thought, like, my to-do list can wait. Letting go of the thought that I'm not successful unless I get all my to-dos done. Not helpful, right? But for her to let go of needing to get all the to-dos, that brings up, beating herself up for not being productive, for not being, good at her job. But to let go of that thought, it's protecting her from being a failure, right? She's a perfectionist. So it's a protection thing against being a failure or people criticizing her work or whatever. And so to let go of that, it's scary, right? Because then what if I let go of this thought that I have to get everything done, and that now I'm not getting anything done, and then I get fired? Like, this is where thoughts take us, right? So for her, it's like, okay, well, practice not getting everything done on your to-do list, and then look at what thoughts come up, and then we work on the thoughts. We distance, we challenge, like, we look at what are some other thoughts. Got to get the new frame of reference, the new perspective. So that is what I have on thoughts today. So to recap everything, what you want to remember here, that if you take nothing else away from this episode, you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not facts. They're just words. Okay, that was a few things, but they're sentences. So just remember that, like, you have the option to keep a thought or not keep a thought. And when you can start to practice self-awareness, to really, just to notice what they are, you can start to, get a little more like critical of like, oh yeah, that one's not really very helpful. Why do I have it? Why do I hang on to it? Like, how can I distance from it? How is it true? How can I challenge that thought? And if you need help with it, because this stuff, it's some of the most fun work that I do with people, because it is kind of mind-blowing when people start to realize, like, they'll start to actually try to explain how a thought is true. And then I'll be, well, that's just a thought too. And it's just like totally mind-blowing. And every time people are like, kind of like, oh my God, you're right. So if you want help with this, I am here for you. Let's talk. Shoot me an email at Courtney@CourtneyRivard.com. You can go to the podcast website and fill out the contact form, or you can go to my website, CourtneyRivard.com, and fill out the contact form there as well. So with that, friends, I hope this was really helpful. If you have any questions about it, feel free to message me as well. I always love to hear from my listeners. And before I go, if you could please take some time to rate and review the show, that would be awesome. It just helps more people find it. And I've had a lot of great feedback, and I just want to reach more people. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. And again, hope it was super helpful, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real, Brave, and Unstoppable. If you'd like to learn more about creating an authentic life that's true to who you are, visit CourtneyRivard.com/lovelife to download your free guide on how to build your vision and create a life that you love. You'll be so glad you did. I'll see you next time.